G'day and welcome. I'm so glad you've taken the time to listen to this story. Whether you're here for the journey or to help you drift off to sleep, I truly appreciate it. This story will be released in parts, with about 4 chapters at a time, so if you're tuning in early, you might need to wait for the next chapters to be released. No matter what brings you here, whether it's to relax or to dive into the story, I'm chuffed to have you along. I hope you find it intriguing and relaxing enough to come back for more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. A dusty dilemma. The day had barely begun, but already the school was buzzing with a sense of urgency. Amelia stood at the front of her classroom, staring down at a broken piece of science equipment, a crucial component for the upcoming science fair. It was a display model meant to showcase the principles of electricity, but the wiring had snapped, and now there was no way to fix it with the supplies on hand. Great, just great, she muttered to herself. This was the last thing she needed on top of everything else. Emily, who had been eagerly awaiting the science fair, walked up to her desk, eyes wide. "Miss, what's wrong with it? Are we still going to have the fair?" Amelia smiled faintly, trying to stay calm. "We'll figure something out, Emily. Don't worry." But inside, Amelia felt the pressure mounting. The science fair was supposed to be her big moment, her chance to show the kids that she could handle the challenges of teaching in Longreach. But with the equipment broken, she was running out of time. Just then, Mr. Thompson walked into the room, his usual confident stride causing him to inadvertently bump into a chair. He stopped, looking at the mess of wires and broken pieces. "Need some help, Amelia?" he asked, his tone warm but laced with his typical dry humor. Amelia, still feeling the weight of the situation, looked up, surprised. "You're asking me for help with science equipment?" "Well, I know my way around a few tools, and I've got a knack for fixing things. Can't leave a teacher in distress now, can I?" He winked, but the playfulness in his eyes suggested that, despite the teasing, he was genuinely offering to help. Amelia hesitated for a moment, but then nodded, realizing that any solution was better than no solution at all. "Thanks, Mr. Thompson. I really appreciate it." The two of them worked side by side, pulling together supplies from the school's limited resources. Amelia couldn't help but notice how Mr. Thompson approached the problem with the same calm confidence he exuded in PE class. He didn't rush, didn't panic. He simply took the pieces in hand, inspecting each one with a steady gaze. "You know, I've got to admit, I didn't expect you to be so good with this kind of thing," Amelia remarked as she watched him work. He gave a modest shrug. "Well, I've got my hands in a lot of things. Being a PE teacher's not the only skill I've got. I was a bit of a tinkerer in my younger days." Amelia raised an eyebrow. "A tinkerer, you? I thought you were all about sports and physical endurance." "I'm full of surprises," he said with a grin, tightening a bolt. "Did you know I can fix a bicycle in under 10 minutes? And I'm pretty handy with carpentry too." Amelia chuckled. "I'm starting to think I underestimated you." "You're not the only one," he teased. "It's hard to shake off the reputation of being the guy who blows whistles and runs laps. But there's more to me than just fitness and football." As they continued to work, Amelia started to see Mr. Thompson in a new light. He wasn't just the PE teacher with the booming voice. He was someone who had depth, someone who cared enough to pitch in when things got tough. "I've been thinking," she said, glancing up at him as she held a tool. "This school, it's so different from what I'm used to. I feel like I'm still trying to figure out where I fit in." Mr. Thompson stopped and met her gaze. "I get that. This place can be tough to navigate at first. But don't worry, Amelia, you're doing fine. It's not about fitting in, it's about finding your own rhythm. The kids respect you, they're rooting for you, even if they don't always show it." Amelia took a deep breath. "I hope so. Trust me, they do. And when it comes to this fair, we've got it covered. You'll see," he said with a wink, handing her the fixed piece of equipment. Amelia smiled, feeling the weight on her shoulders lift just a little. "Thanks again, Mr. Thompson." "No problem, just doing my bit to help you out," he replied before turning to leave. "Let me know if you need anything else." As he walked out of the room, Amelia couldn't help but feel a shift in her perception of him. Jayden might have been the one to capture her attention first, but Mr. Thompson, well, he was proving that there was more to Longreach than the clichés she'd first imagined. When she returned to her desk, Emily came over to check on the progress. "Miss, you did it! It's fixed!" Amelia grinned, feeling a surge of pride. "We did it, Emily. You know, sometimes it takes a little teamwork to make things work." Emily nodded enthusiastically. "You've got this, miss. I knew you would." Just as Amelia was about to return to organizing the rest of the fair details, a familiar voice called from the doorway. "You two ready to take the kids to the fairgrounds?" It was Jayden, his tone light but a little teasing. "I hear the show's about to kick off, and I've been roped into driving the kids over there. Figured I'd offer you a lift." Amelia turned, slightly surprised to see him there, but grateful for the gesture. "Thanks, Jayden. That would be great." As they headed out together, the sense of camaraderie that had been growing between her and the townspeople, especially Jayden, deepened. Amelia realized that, just like fixing the broken equipment, finding her place in Longreach was a puzzle. But with a little help from her new friends and her growing sense of belonging, she was beginning to solve it, one piece at a time. The social circuit. The invitation came in a flash of bright colours and enthusiasm. Margaret had appeared at Amelia's bedroom door, already holding 2 tickets to the Longreach picnic races. "You've got to come, love," she insisted with a smile that left no room for refusal. "It's the highlight of the year. You can't be a part of this town and not go to the races." Amelia hesitated, feeling a mix of anxiety and reluctance bubbling up. Social events like this were always tricky, especially in a small town where everyone knew everyone. She wasn't exactly the life of the party, and the thought of standing alone, surrounded by strangers, made her stomach churn. Margaret, sensing her hesitation, put a reassuring hand on her arm. "You'll have a blast, I promise. And don't you worry about fitting in. Everyone will be friendly. Besides, you've got me." She winked, her voice filled with confidence and cheer. "The town's been dying to meet you, and what better way than this?" Amelia gave a small, uncertain smile. "Okay, I'll go, for you." "That's the spirit," Margaret beamed. "We'll have fun, and I'll introduce you to everyone. It'll be a blast." The day of the races arrived, and Amelia found herself standing in front of her mirror, unsure of what to wear. It wasn't a formal event, but the idea of blending in still felt daunting. After some deliberation, she chose a simple light blue dress with a pattern of small flowers, something that felt casual but feminine. It was a modest choice, but at least it gave her the confidence she needed to face the crowd. As she stepped out into the warm, dry air, she felt her nerves rise again. Margaret was already waiting for her, looking effortlessly chic in a wide-brimmed hat and a patterned sundress. "Come on, love, let's go," she said, practically pulling Amelia into the car. The racecourse was a bustling hub of activity when they arrived. Stalls lined the perimeter, selling everything from homemade pies to local crafts, while the sounds of chatter and laughter filled the air. The sun hung high in the sky, beating down on the crowd, but the atmosphere was vibrant, the energy infectious. People waved and called out to each other, as though they hadn't seen each other in days, even though most of them had likely crossed paths earlier that morning. Amelia's initial hesitance began to dissolve as she was swept into the festivities. Margaret led her from group to group, introducing her to a variety of locals who greeted her with warm smiles and friendly handshakes. They talked about everything from the weather to the upcoming races, and Amelia, despite her anxiety, found herself laughing along, feeling less and less like an outsider. "Now, this is the life!" Margaret exclaimed as they found a spot by the racetrack. A group of women nearby had started up a conversation with Amelia, their energy as welcoming as the sun overhead. Amelia soon realized she wasn't the only one feeling a bit out of place. Many of the people at the event were newcomers or had recently moved to Longreach, and they all had stories to share about settling in. It felt reassuring, like she wasn't alone in navigating the small-town dynamic. As the races began, Amelia's focus shifted. Horses galloped around the track and cheers erupted from the crowd as each race drew to its thrilling conclusion. The air was thick with excitement, and for a moment Amelia forgot her nerves entirely. She found herself swept up in the atmosphere, clapping, laughing, and even joining in on the bets with a few locals. She didn't win any, but she didn't mind. She was having fun, and for the first time in a while, she felt truly included. Then, amid the bustling crowd, she saw him, Jayden. He was leaning casually against a wooden fence, one arm crossed over the other, watching the race with an air of quiet confidence. His hat was tipped back, and a faint smile played on his lips as he talked to a group of men beside him. Amelia's heart gave an unexpected flutter, and she quickly looked away, hoping she hadn't been caught staring, but Margaret was already nudging her in Jayden's direction. "There he is," she whispered, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "You should go and say hello. He's not so scary once you get to know him." Amelia swallowed hard, her palms suddenly clammy. I don't know." "Oh, come on," Margaret urged with a knowing grin. "What's the worst that could happen? Just go. You're here to have fun, remember?" Before Amelia could protest further, Margaret had already started walking over to where Jayden was standing, pulling Amelia along with her. Jayden turned when he heard their footsteps. His easy smile met her gaze as he tipped his hat with a teasing glint in his eyes. Well, if it isn't the newest addition to Longreach," he said, his voice warm and friendly. "How's the town treating you, Amelia?" She forced a smile, trying to ignore the flutter of nerves. It's been good. Everyone's been so welcoming." Margaret, who had already moved on to chatting with the other men, left them alone for a moment. The air between Amelia and Jayden was unexpectedly easy. The crowds continued to cheer as the horses sped around the track, but for a few moments it felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of them. Amelia fidgeted, unsure of how to fill the silence, but Jayden was quick to break it. "I'm glad you came out today," he said. "It's nice to see you getting into the swing of things here." Amelia looked up at him, noticing the slight tilt of his head, the way his eyes softened when he spoke. "Yeah, it's been fun," she admitted. "A little overwhelming, but fun." Jayden chuckled. "I get it. It can take a while to settle in, but I think you're doing great. You're not the only one who was a little uncertain when they first arrived." Amelia felt a small sense of relief at his words. "I guess I'm still figuring it out. It's a lot different from Noosa." "I bet." Jayden took a step closer, his gaze briefly flicking to the racetrack before returning to her. "But you'll get there. Longreach has a way of growing on you." Amelia smiled, a bit shy, but something in her chest seemed to loosen. They stood there for a moment longer, their eyes meeting and holding in a way that felt like a quiet conversation, without words. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, painting the clouds in hues of orange and pink, Jayden gestured toward the horizon. "You ever watch the sunset here? It's different from anywhere else." Amelia nodded, still feeling the warmth of his presence. "I haven't had the chance, but I'd like to." Without another word, Jayden led her toward a quieter spot, away from the crowds. They both sat down on the grass, the soft evening light casting long shadows over the track. The horses were no longer racing, but the sounds of the event lingered in the air, distant voices, the clink of glasses, the rustle of paper from the betting booth. For a moment, Amelia simply watched the sunset, the vibrant colors stretching across the sky. She glanced at Jayden, who was watching her with an unreadable expression, his profile framed by the golden light. "Thanks for this," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the breeze. Jayden turned his head, catching her eye. "Anytime." It wasn't much, but in that quiet moment, something unspoken passed between them, a connection that felt fragile but real. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Amelia couldn't help but wonder what might be beginning to bloom between them. Setbacks and surprises. Amelia walked into the classroom with her usual mix of excitement and uncertainty. The lesson plans were ready, her notes prepared, and the students, well, they were as ready as they ever were. Today was supposed to be another smooth day of teaching, another step in the journey of settling into her new life in Longreach. But by recess, it was clear things weren't going as planned. It started with a few minor disruptions, a pencil case rolling across the floor, a whispered conversation too loud for comfort, and a couple of students passing notes behind their books. Amelia tried to push through, her patience stretched thin but intact. She gave gentle reminders to refocus, even laughed off a few jokes that weren't quite so funny. But when Thomas, one of her more boisterous students, stood up and began making exaggerated gestures while mimicking a horse, it crossed a line. A ripple of laughter spread through the class, and suddenly all of her carefully prepared notes and lesson plans felt like they were crumbling away. "Thomas, please sit down," she said, her voice tight but controlled. "We're focusing on the lesson now." The room grew quiet, but it wasn't the silence of compliance. It was the silence of students watching, waiting for what would come next. Amelia felt a knot tighten in her chest. She had always been able to manage a classroom before. Her methods were tried and true. But here in Longreach, in this new school, it was different. The kids weren't necessarily rebellious, but they were more spirited. And more than that, they were testing her limits. When Thomas rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath, a few other students snickered. Amelia's resolve wavered, and she knew her next move would be crucial. She inhaled deeply, trying to steady herself. "Thomas, I'm asking you to sit down, now." Her voice had lost its gentle tone, and she could feel the shift in the atmosphere. There was a moment of hesitation before Thomas plopped back into his seat, grinning in defiance. It wasn't enough. Amelia knew this moment would stick with her, but she also knew she couldn't let it define her. She had to regain control. By the time the bell rang for lunch, Amelia's nerves were frayed. She stood in the teacher's lounge, staring down at her lunch as if the sandwich might offer some kind of solution. Her reflection on the morning's lesson was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Margaret slid into the seat beside her, her brow raised with concern. "Rough day?" she asked softly, her voice laced with understanding. Amelia sighed, nodding. "I don't know what happened. It's like I lost them halfway through the lesson. I've never had a class turn on me like that before." Margaret's expression softened. "You're doing great, trust me. Every teacher has a day like this. You're still finding your rhythm with them. They'll respect you once they see you mean business. Kids are like that. They test boundaries. It's part of the job." Amelia frowned, chewing on her lip. "But what if I'm just not cut out for this? What if they don't respect me? I feel like I'm failing them." "Don't be so hard on yourself. The fact that you're here, asking these questions, means you care. And that's the most important thing. You'll find your footing." Amelia appreciated the reassurance, but the doubt still lingered. She'd have to get back in there and try again, but she wasn't sure how. The following morning, still shaken by the previous day's events, Amelia walked into class with a new resolve. The students could sense the change immediately. She was firmer, her expectations clearer. When the chatter started to build up, she didn't let it slide. She raised her voice once, cutting through the noise. "All right, everyone, let's get focused," she said, her tone strong but not angry. "We've got work to do, and it's going to be a good day. no more distractions. This time the students listened. Slowly they settled into their seats and the lesson began. There were still moments of mischief. Thomas, predictably, was the first to test her limits, but she didn't back down. With each passing minute, she found her footing, regaining the authority she had almost lost. By the end of the day, Amelia was exhausted, but she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She'd faced the challenge head-on, and though the day hadn't been perfect, she knew she'd handled it as best she could. It was a small victory, but it was hers. Just as she was about to head home, Margaret popped her head into the classroom, a grin on her face. "Well, look at you, handling that class like a pro." Amelia smiled wearily. "I don't know about a pro, but I got through it." Margaret's grin widened. "You're tougher than you think. I knew you had it in you." Amelia felt a burst of pride at her friend's words, but before she could respond, the door to the classroom opened, and in walked a figure who hadn't been expected, Jayden. He stood there holding a large box filled with supplies, looking almost embarrassed to be interrupting. I heard you might need a little help with some classroom things," he said, his hands shifting the box awkwardly as if he wasn't sure where to put it. Amelia blinked, caught off guard. "What's all this?" "Oh, just a few things for the science experiments. You know, the kind of stuff that never seems to be around when you need it." He gave a sheepish grin. "Figured I could help out." She stared at him for a moment, then shook her head. "Jayden, this is... wow, you really didn't have to." It's no big deal." He shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "I've got a few things lying around the property that might be useful. Thought it could save you some time." Amelia stood there for a beat, taken aback by his gesture. She had expected him to be the type to talk about charity as something impersonal, something he'd do for the town. But this felt different. The way he had gone out of his way to help, even in a small, almost casual way, made her pause. "Thank you, Jayden," she said, her voice sincere. This means a lot." He gave a small, self-deprecating smile. "I didn't do much. Anyway, I'll let you get back to it." He turned to go, but then paused at the door. "You're doing a great job, Amelia. Keep it up." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Amelia to stand in stunned silence. Margaret, who had been watching the exchange with a knowing grin, nudged Amelia with her elbow. Well, looks like Jayden's got more on his mind than he's letting on." Amelia blinked, unsure of what to say. Jayden's kindness, unexpected, unspoken, had caught her off guard. "I'm not sure what to think about him," she admitted softly. "It's confusing." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You think so?" "I don't know. It looks like someone's warming up to you." As Amelia locked up the classroom later that evening, her mind replayed Jayden's unexpected visit. There was something in his eyes, something behind the casual nature of his gestures, that made her wonder just how much she really knew about him. But for now, she had to focus on her own journey. She couldn't afford to get distracted. There were challenges ahead and plenty more setbacks to face. But with the support of her colleagues and the surprising gestures of kindness from unexpected places, Amelia felt ready to meet whatever came next. Thank you so much for giving your time and attention to this part of the story. It means the world to me. If you enjoyed the journey so far, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. What parts resonated with you? Did anything stand out, make you laugh, or move you? If you have feedback on ways I can improve or ideas for future stories, I'd love to hear them. Your insights not only help me grow as a storyteller, but also inspire new adventures to explore. Until we meet again in the next part of this tale, I wish you relaxation, peacefulness, and moments of joy in your own journey.